Good afternoon, everyone. I don't think I've seen you since orientation, so it's been a while. I'm really glad you're here. As social work students, and perhaps future social work students, because we welcome everybody, you're at the point where you're learning not just about theories and skills of our profession, but also how to understand people in all their complexity. Today's interfaith dialogue is a chance to practice exactly that. In social work, we talk a lot, we talk all the time, about seeing the whole person. Faith, spirituality, culture, and personal belief systems, whether someone is deeply religious, questioning, spiritual but not religious, or not religious at all, are all part of that picture. These beliefs shape how people cope, how they make decisions, how they understand justice, and how they find meaning. Being able to engage with those perspectives respectfully is part of becoming a thoughtful, ethical social worker. This space isn't about debating who's right or wrong. It's about listening with an open heart, curiosity, asking questions that help us understand one another, and recognizing that multiple truths can exist side by side. You don't need to be an expert in religion to participate. You just need to have openness, humility, and a willingness to learn from the experiences that we will hear about in this room. My hope is that today gives you a chance to stretch your thinking, connect with classmates in new ways, and reflect on how your own beliefs, whatever they may be, shape the way you show up in the world and how you practice this profession. Thank you all for being here, contributing to a community that values respect, inclusion, and genuine dialogue. So let's get started.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and absolutely your remarks are in line on what we are trying to deliver the message. So the space is absolutely, you are all invited to step into the discomfort zone. It doesn't mean that it's not safe. There is a huge difference between safety and discomfort, and we learn through discomfort. We learn and we grow through discomfort. So we invite you to this safe space, but it might be discomfort for some of us. So let's hold the space for each other. And with compassionate listening, we all can learn about ourselves and about our perspectives and about our practices and about our values. I want to invite Hania Omar, the Director of Operation at PLEDJ, to welcome you all.
Hello again. Thank you, Amal. So for those of you who might not have heard of PLEDJ, or this is the first time you're at an event that is co-organized with PLEDJ, PLEDJ stands for Promoting Leadership for Empowerment, Development, and Justice. It's a social change organization that works to strengthen leadership among marginalized communities in Canada and globally, to foster collective empowerment and transformative justice. We work at the intersection of popular education, applied training, community practice, and research. We bring together academic knowledge and people's lived experiences to build leadership that is grounded, critical, and capable of shifting systems of oppression. At our core, we believe sustainable social justice happens when communities most affected by inequity and injustice are centered as leaders and as decision makers. Tonight's gathering is part of our Solidarity Dialogues program. The Solidarity Dialogues were created in response to the polarization we have seen growing in our communities, in our campuses, classrooms, workspaces, streets. It is rooted in the belief that in times of deep division, where polarization can undermine civil discourse, dialogue is a necessity for our collective liberation. The goal of the Solidarity Dialogues is to create brave and safe spaces where marginalized and often silenced voices can be heard, and empathy and mutual understanding can grow. The goal is also for these spaces to be adaptable, replicable, and applied in different contexts. It's not about eliminating conflict. It's about helping people understand the root causes of conflict, develop their self-awareness, their resilience, their critical consciousness, and their ability to engage with and navigate tensions. It's about making the choice to remain engaged with one another, even when it would be easier not to. And before I finish this section, I would like to thank the Peace Network for Social Harmony, represented by Mr. Brian Brofman here in the room, for their partnership in the Solidarity Dialogues. This event is made possible because of meaningful collaboration. So I would like to thank the School of Social Work, Dr. Nicole Ives, JSJP, the Global Social Justice and Peace Initiative. Thank you so much for your partnership. I would also like to thank Montreal City Mission and Women Weaving Their Dreams for the delicious food we're gonna eat later. Thank you to our moderator, to our panelists, Dr. Patrice Brodeur, Dr. Paula Klein, Dr. Eric Caplan, and Dr. Imaduddin Balkis. Thank you all so much. Yes. And also thank you to our PLEDJ team, Sumana, Noura, Mina, thank you all so much. And finally, thank you to our funders. The Solidarity Dialogues are funded by the Government of Canada, Department of Canadian Heritage, and other funders. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Hania, very much. And now I want to invite Professor Patrice Brodeur. How is my French? Good. To introduce the panelists and start the panel that will last for 1 hour. And then we will have half an hour for Q&A that will be moderated by Dr. Godfrey. And after, we will have Dr. Sarah conclude and provide the summary and how we are going to move forward with what we learn here to bring into our classroom after March break. So, Professor Patrice, the floor is yours. And I assure you, I'm not going to interrupt you.
Shukran. Kwekwe, bonjour, good afternoon, assalamu alaikum, and Ramadan Kareem for those of you who are Muslims, and some of you may also be fasting. Also to all the Christians who are doing Lent, I wish you a wonderful Lent season. And for all others who are here, whatever your worldview might be, whether it's atheist, agnostic, humanist, religious, one shape or form, everybody's welcome here, because our social harmony is not possible without a fully inclusive understanding and openness and respect for this incredible diversity of worldviews that exist both here at this university in Montreal and, of course, around the world. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank very much Nicole and Amal and also Hania for their introductory words. You just took so many ideas that I had in my mind, so I'm not going to repeat. But I just want to say one thing, is that standing up to hate takes courage. But it also takes a sense, an innate sense, I would say, of what justice is, so that you can recognize it. And some psychologists, have done all kinds of wonderful studies that are demonstrating that already by 3, 4, 5 years old, children already have a sense of what justice is. And so it's a natural thing. Whatever your worldview is, it is natural. But then some of us are able to, or were fortunate enough to grow up in families, in contexts whereby that sense of justice was further nurtured. And it was somehow nurtured through a variety of transmission, oral, in writing, of stories, of quotes from famous people, from sacred texts, and so on and so forth, somehow grounding us in a knowledge of what justice is in a more profound way. And so that's what the first part of today is all about, is increasing our knowledge of Judaism and the ways in which, for Professor Eric Caplan, who is the director of the Jewish Studies Department here, and an associate professor of contemporary Judaism and Jewish education, he will give his insights on how Judaism sort of thinks about peace and justice, and all the way in terms of how it actually also takes stance today, or at least parts of the community are taking stance towards justice. And therefore, by that, of course, opposing hate. And then we'll have very soon to be Dr. Balkis, who's in the back over there, right behind actually Dr. Caplan. And he will present his perspective on Islam and the way in which justice is central to Islam and how it contributes to peace, and especially how Muslims today combat hatred and in all of its different forms, especially, of course, Islamophobia, in the same way as Jews, of course, will combat initially primarily anti-Semitism, but often much more than that. And the beauty is often people from different religious or no religious traditions come together to collaborate together to combat hatred of all forms. And finally, we'll have Dr. Paula Klein.
Not yet.
Not yet? No, not yet. Soon to be? No?
2 more years.
2 more years. Okay, so okay, less than soon, but soon. Anyway, for me, that's soon. Anyway, so, and basically, Reverend Paula is actually going to be presenting her understanding of, from a Christian perspective, of, again, that tradition of justice in Christianity as it sort of connects to its understanding of peace. And she will do it in some very interesting sort of creative ways, from what I hear. So I very much look forward to that presentation as well. So, having said that, I'm a bit of a minimalist, so that's where I stop. And you will see after each person, or as a person comes up to speak, you will see more details about their biography in the back, okay? So this way you don't get me to boringly read through that. So, Dr. Caplan, Eric, it's your turn.
So, the directives that we got from Professor Brodeur were very broad. And anytime you get a broad directive, you got to think, okay, how are you going to slice it? And my inclination is always to narrow a topic, but to go a bit deeper into it than to kind of cover a lot of ground, but to do so superficially. So what this means for the sources I put together is that I'm focusing on the question of peace. The reason why, right, so the directive that we got was to talk about the tradition's understanding of peace and justice. But let's face it, every one of the religious traditions in the world that I'm familiar with say wonderful things about the value of peace, right? The real issue is what happens on the ground, right? How does the concept of peace actually play out when people are in a position of power and then have to act on the commitments that are in their tradition? So that's kind of what I've decided to focus on. I'm writing a book on Judaism and social justice, and I've got my students here who are in the middle of doing a paper on Jewish social justice organizations and what they're up to. So in the Q&A, I would love to take some questions about what's happening in the Jewish communal world and what are some of the topics that Jews are engaging with and what they're doing about them, because as Patrice said, Jews are very active in social justice movements. Definitely a larger percentage of Jews play key pieces in social justice movements in North America than their demographic weight. So there is a lot to say there. But let's start off here looking at peace, just checking. So I got about like 3:30. Okay, so like I said, there's no shortage of really powerful and beautiful statements in the Jewish tradition, right? So I'll just read a couple out to you. And these sources, I'm happy to share them with the social work students afterwards, and I'll put them up on our website as well. So in the Psalms, which is actually shared between Judaism and Christianity, because the Psalms are part of as part of Christian worship as well. Psalm 34 has the line that most of you probably have heard: "Seek peace and pursue it." And in the Palestinian Talmud, which is the Talmud done in Palestine in the 4th century, they comment on this statement that the law does not order you to run after or pursue the other commandments, but only to fulfill them on the appropriate occasion. But peace you must seek in your own place and pursue it even to another place as well. Right? Or in the prophet Zechariah, it says, "This is the word of God, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the God of hosts." And in the vision for the end of time, end of days on earth, not in the afterlife, that's in the prophets, in this case specifically Isaiah, it says, "God will judge among the nations and arbitrate for the many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not take up sword against nation. They shall never again know war." Right? So the ideal situation is a situation of peace. And then finally, like in terms of these kind of beautiful and powerful statements in the Jewish tradition, we can look towards Pirkei Avot, which is from the 2nd century. And it says, Rabban Shimon Gamliel used to say, "On 3 things does the world stand: on justice, on truth, and on peace. As it is said, execute the judgment of truth and peace in your gates," which is also a quote from Zechariah. So if you heard those verses, what would you expect other things that might be said about war, right, within the context of the Bible? Well, the same Bible that gave you these passages also gives you Deuteronomy 20, right? And Deuteronomy 20 says, "When you approach a town to attack it, you shall offer it terms of peace," right? "But if it responds peacefully and lets you in, all the people present there shall serve you as forced labor. If it does not surrender to you, but would join battle with you," in other words, fight against you, "you shall lay siege to it. And when your God delivers it into your hand, you shall put all its males to the sword. You may, however, take as your booty the women, the children, the livestock, and everything in the town, all its spoil, and enjoy the use of the spoil of your enemy, which your God gives you." Right? This is from the same tradition, right? This is from the same tradition. The rabbinic tradition that came after the Hebrew Bible developed the concept that there are 2 types of wars. And I'll just give it to you from Maimonides, just because it's, he, as his talent in the Middle Ages, he just puts it together really very sharply. Right? So there's Milchemet Mitzvah, a war of command. What is that? That is a war against the 7 nations that were in the land of Israel before the Jews entered it. Right? That particular type of war was commanded by God, and therefore takes precedence over anything else that might be happening on a king's plate at any given moment. Right? Is the Milchemet Mitzvah, right? The one of commandment. But then there's Milchemet Reshut. Milchemet Reshut means a war that you choose. It's not one of these wars. It's another type of war. What are the laws based on that? It says, you have to prioritize the Milchemet Mitzvah, but you can do a Milchemet Reshut It says, and this can be a war fought with other nations in order to expand the borders of Israel or magnify its greatness and reputation. Now, the one of command, you don't need to have the okay of the Jewish court system to proceed if you're a king. The one of choice, you do need to get it, right? Which is interesting in our context because south of the border, we have a leader who doesn't seem to believe in getting permission to do anything militarily, even though his constitution says that he has to, in the same way these law codes do, right? So right from the start, right, in the Jewish classical text, you have this tension between ideals, right? Peace is an ideal, and things that are lived out in the life of a nation. I don't know anything that is going to be said under Christianity, but Christianity has beautiful texts concerning peace, but it also gave us a bunch of crusades, right? And a multiplicity of other things. And the same can be said about Islam in other things. So to me, the issue is what happens. So I only have 4 minutes left, which is what I thought was going to happen, as it always happens every time I speak. There's even a sign telling me I only have 5 minutes, in case I didn't notice it. So I just want to give you an example from 1930, right? 1930 is a pivotal year in the history of the settlement of the land of Israel and the modern Zionist movement. It's after the major clashes of 1929, which, if you know your history, this part of history was a time of major clashes in the territory, because it's really at around this time that the presence of Jews in the country is reaching what is a noticeably different number. Jews have always been in the land of Israel. Jews have never not been in the land of Israel. But after 3 immigrations from Europe between the 1880s and 1930, the number of Jews in Israel had increased. And because of the major tensions of 1929, it triggered a lot of reflection amongst the Zionist movement about how to proceed. And I'm just going to give you the 2 examples from this year, this pivotal year, 1930. But I have text here which you'll see, afterwards in the section that deal with the exact same tensions as they're talked about today in our closer to our time, right? So Judah Magnus was a major figure in the early Zionist movement. The president of the Hebrew University actually lived in Israel, which was in the land of Israel, which is not true of many of the early Zionist thinkers. And he says, what is meant by the term national government? He says, if it means Arab national, or if it means Jewish national, I am opposed to it. If, however, it means a binational government, a Palestine government, in which the word Palestine includes all 3 religions equally, then I am all for it. Why? Right? He says, I am not unmindful of the risks of such an experiment, particularly because of the political immaturity of large parts of the country, Jewish and Arab, and the low state of morals and education. But if Jew and Arab are to live together in Palestine, it must be as an act of faith that they are brother peoples and that they can rise above their weaknesses and their passion, however difficult this may now seem. Right? And here connects to what I said before, the Joshua method, right? Joshua is the Jewish leader who oversees the conquering of the land of Israel after Moses' death. The Joshua method is not the way for us of entering the promised land, the retention of bayonets in the land against the will of the majority of the population is repugnant to men of goodwill, and the eternal people should rather continue its long wait than attempt to establish a home in the Holy Land, except of terms of understanding and peace. Why? Because that's what the Jewish tradition requires, in addition to what his own sense of morality requires. That same year, and with this I will end, that same year, Vladimir, or not that year, it was a couple years earlier, Vladimir Jabotinsky, who was the founder of the revisionist Zionist movement, that is the movement that is behind the Likud party in Israel, which gave us Begin, Shamir, and Netanyahu, although it was a very different party 40 years ago, I think, than it is today. He basically says if you take the perspective of Magnus and say that we can only settle the land of Israel with the agreement of the Arabs who are in the territory, you might as well just shut down the Zionist project now. Why? Because they will never accept that. So the only way of dealing with this is creating facts on the ground that are so powerful that the Arab local populations will have to accept the reality of Jewish life in this territory. And then he says, if you think that is immoral, you're wrong, because Zionism as a movement is moral. Right? Because the idea of the reestablishment of a Jewish state is moral. And if this is what is required to do so, it is moral. Now, what he says is, that doesn't mean that there can't be agreements between us and the Arab population. But to imagine that they will be voluntary agreements is to be naive. The need of the moment requires a show of force. If you ask either person, what do they think of the passages from the prophets about peace? They would both say they are wonderful. But the difference is in their reading of how those passages can be realized in the particular moment in which Jews are living in the 1920s and 1930s.
Thank you.
I think it's important, of course, you raised the challenge of ideals versus reality. Many of those ideals being rooted in sacred text or these wonderful quotes, but also the realities of interpretation and how to interpret those texts and different approaches to the history, basically. So thank you very much, Dr. Professor Caplan, for your presentation. And let's move forward now and pass to Imaduddin Balkis. And I just want to add that he's also had more than 35 years of experience working on the ground with different agencies of the United Nations. And so he also has this incredible practical experience as now he pursues his doctoral studies on science. So,
and thank you for clarifying that I'm not a doctor yet. PhD candidate. I'm working hard on that. My friend ChatGPT. But thank you very much, everyone, for being here. My presentations will basically focus on what Eric warned you against, just text. But that's important. I mean, I'm gonna be speech out.
And Quran 5:8 warns believer not to allow hatred towards others to lead to injustice. This verse instructs believers to stand firmly for justice, even against themselves and their relatives. And it's probably one of the most powerful statements promoting justice in scriptural literature. I mean, the slides will be available for you to download later on. The Quran commands communal diversity as a basis for peaceful coexistence and upholding justice. It dedicates numerous verses to emphasize this theme. We see this more clearly after the Prophet, peace be upon him, migrated to Medina, and his companions were the new community of the faithful and began to interact with other communities of faith already found in Medina. And several Quranic instructions provided guidance for those Muslims on peaceful coexistence with other citizens of Medina, which included, of course, what the Quran calls the people of the book, mostly Jews and Christians. So this is how the Quran instructs Muslims to engage with the other religious communities. Now, this is again two more verses that instruct the believers how to. I mean, these verses actually tell us something which is quite powerful. It says that Muslims are not the only ones who are going to go to heaven. I mean, it's clear right there, because Islam recognizes the other religious communities. Islam recognizes the other two religious communities at that time in Medina, the Jews and the Christians, and recognizes their books, their scriptures, their prophets, and I think those two verses capture clearly this sentiment. And finally, this final verse, which is probably one of the most powerful statements promoting religious plurality already 1400 years ago. It's addressed mainly to the three groups in Medina, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. And it says, to each we have prescribed a law and a path. If God has so willed, he would have made you into a single community, but he did not. The verse goes, but to test you in what he has given you. Why then one with another in good works? To God you will all return, then he shall inform you concerning that in which you disputed. I mean, the emphasis here is that the fact that it recognizes difference as a right for other communities. And it instructs that judgment concerning those differences are not to be settled or adjudicated in this world. It asks clearly to suspend judgment on these things to God himself on Judgment Day. So this clearly says that the relations among these communities should not be run based on religious difference. The religious difference is between you and God, but communally there are other set of human values to be put into action, not different religious difference. More time?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. How do Muslim institutions fight Islamophobia nowadays? There are prominent institutions like Al-Azhar in Cairo are actively working to counter extremism and promote understanding. There's an observatory for combating extremism formed by Al-Azhar. And a landmark achievement in this effort is a document on human fraternity, co-signed in 2019 by the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar and the Pope Francis. I mean, other than this, I'm not aware of any serious attempts to, but Islamophobia is flourishing, unfortunately. Thank you very much.
Shukran jazilan, soon to be Dr. Ahmad.
I thought slides would make it easier, but
Yes, and sorry for the technical challenge at the beginning. But again, I think it's important to see how much resources we have in the sacred text, and then how also in the contemporary period, you gave a few examples of contemporary declarations, which were actually, in many ways, began at the leadership of Muslims, of some of the highest Muslim political figures. And there are several other of these declarations. I won't start now, but they do exist. And that's very important for the world to know. But now we're going to turn to Christianity, and we're going to turn to Reverend Paula Klein. And I just want to add one thing in particular, is that she is an amazing religious leader, not only nurturing a Christian community in downtown Montreal, but also executive director of the Montreal City Mission, which does a lot of work sort of helping sort of the more unfortunate in our midst, but also doing what I called standing up to hate in advance, meaning doing a lot of dialogue work to prevent the hate or diminish it by nurturing relationships between people of different faiths, including leading an iftar that is an interfaith iftar. That's amazing. And so very few cities around the world, I think, have that. And this is thanks in many ways to your leadership. And I just wanted to say this, as well as, of course, many people from MCM and others. But that's why we are really appreciate your being here with us. So you want it here, right?
I don't know.
Maybe I should hold it so you can hear me. Merci, Patrice, pour ces bons mots. Très gentil. Like has been already said, these conversations are important. Whether you are a person of faith, an atheist, an agnostic, spiritual but not religious, as was mentioned earlier, whether you identify as secular, all of us are impacted by what's going on with religion today. We're impacted by the conversations that we have. We're impacted by the social attitudes toward religion. We're impacted by the laws that our governments are passing about religion. And I'll give you two quick examples. Here in Quebec, of course, we have the secular laws, les lois de laïcité, 21 and 9. Those laws disproportionately discriminate against Muslim women who wear the hijab. Okay? And when a segment of the population is discriminated against, suffers from discrimination, whether that be on the basis of religion, sexual orientation, race, color, creed, immigration status. When one segment of the population is discriminated against, we all suffer because that makes holes, that tears holes in the social fabric that keeps us all together, that should keep us all together. St. Paul's, I was told I had to quote the scripture, so get some scripture quotes in here. St. Paul, in his letter to the church in Corinth in the first century, when he was on the road back then trying to drum up business for this new religion called Christianity, he wrote that when one member of the body suffers, the entire body suffers. And some of you may be familiar with Martin Niemöller, who was a Lutheran pastor, active during the Second World Wars, opposed Hitler, sent to the concentration camps. Other Christian leaders, of course, supported Nazism. And he once wrote that in Germany, they first came for the communists. And I didn't protest because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't protest because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for the trade unionists. I didn't protest. I wasn't a trade unionist.
Then they came for the homosexuals. I didn't protest. I wasn't a homosexual. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't protest because I was a Protestant. And when they came for me, well, there was no one left to protest. I'll come back to that difficult relationship in Christianity between the oppressors and those who support the oppressors, and the oppressed and those who support the oppressed. But my second example, very quickly, I've got a dry mouth and I'm not fasting, Alma. No, yeah, I see it there. Yeah, I've got my water. It's okay. It's okay. Whoa. In the States, we have a right-wing Christian nationalists taking books off library shelves because they deal with the LGBTQ community, because they deal with critical race theory. We have some of those individuals also supporting Trump and his terrorist squad, ICE. On the other end of the spectrum, of course, we have Christians, Jews, Muslims, a whole rainbow coalition standing up and protesting those actions at their risk and peril, because as we've seen, people are being killed. So again, that difficult relationship in Christianity between oppression and standing up to oppression, and I'll come back to it in a second. But now I'd like to go to September 2015. 10 years ago, a lot of you look kind of young, so I don't know where you were 10 years ago. But you may recall that the Syrian war was in full swing, full force, and we weren't really that much aware of it in the West until a photo was beamed across the world. The photo of that little Syrian boy, that 2-year-old boy, his limp body washed up on a beach, Alain Kurdi. And people wanted to do something here in Canada, here in Montreal. At Montreal City Mission, we've been working with refugees and newcomers for over 100 years. And at that time, we took to the square in front of St. James United Church, where we're located. It's on St. Catherine Street. That big old church has a square in front of it. With our pancarte, Accueillons des réfugiés syriens, welcome Syrian refugees. And we had a petition that we were circulating, demanding the federal government, Stephen Harper's conservative government, to welcome more Syrian refugees. He had promised to welcome 10,000 at the time. We needed to welcome many more than that. And the first day we went out with the petition, people were anxious to sign it, and it was really gratifying. We said, yay, this is working. But we thought, well, we'll go it again, and probably we won't be that successful. And every day we went out, people were practically lining up to sign this petition. And I have to say, I meet incredible people on a daily basis in my work, but that was one of those moments where I really felt that collective goodness of people, their compassion, wanting to get involved. We sent off those petitions. Next month, there was an election. The Liberals of Justin Trudeau won power, and in the following months, I think over 60,000 Syrian refugees were welcomed. Not just because of our petitions, of course, but I'm sure it helped. And so I guess my first point is, and I'm probably not going to get through all my points, I'm thinking, but is how do we stand up to justice, or for justice rather? How do we stand up against hate? Well, we begin by standing up, tout simplement. We begin by going to those demonstrations, signing those petitions, making sure that our voice for justice is heard. At that same time, September 2015, I got a call from a social work student doing his master's and was getting a little antsy in school. Perhaps I shouldn't be saying that, eh, Nicole? And wanted to roll up his sleeves and get involved in some community work, volunteer at MCM. So I said, sure, come down. And he likes to tell the story afterwards of that day when he came down to the church. He's walking in the side door. He's walking up this windy, creaky, dark staircase. Sounds like a horror film. And he's asking himself, what am I, a Muslim, Bedouin, Palestinian, doing coming to this church to do volunteer work? Well, he made it up to the 3rd floor where we're located. We gave him a desk. He started working. We hired him because he did such great work. And today he's the assistant director of MCM. Full disclosure, he's the spouse of Anwar al-Hajouj. But I knew neither Amal or Anwar 10 years ago. But in this past decade, I have to say their presence and their commitment to justice and peace has been a blessing to me personally, but also to MCM. And so Anwar, he launched a program called MAN Ensemble, M-A-N, together in Arabic. And an important element of that program, and Patrice just mentioned it, is gathering people together. So we're having an iftar next week, and we have 2 of those gatherings every year, an iftar and then a bon voisin gathering, usually with 100 people, Jews, Christians, Muslims, secular community. And they're important times because it's an occasion to sit down, break bread with people across difference. So my second point is, how do we stand up for justice? Well, we gather. We gather together across difference. I hesitate to quote Hebrew scripture, especially in such erudite company, but there's a story I love. When Solomon was anointed king, he didn't ask for riches, land, military might. He asked for a listening heart. A listening heart. And I think that's a very important point. It's my next point is, how do we stand up for justice? How do we stand up against hate? Well, we have to cultivate with humility that listening heart. And we're also talking a lot about Anwar. He'll be here in a few minutes with the food. He also likes to tell the story that, or not a story, but when people come into his office and ask for assistance, he's a social worker, they come in, they need employment, they need housing, they need material assistance, referrals, etc., and he does the best to respond to their needs. But at a certain point in the conversation, he'll stop and say, okay, so now what can you do for me? Well, what do you mean, what can I do for you? I'm the refugee here. I'm here for help. You're the one supposed to be helping me. But very quickly, a door opens, a new door opens, and we find out that the woman from Sudan in her native country had been an internationally acclaimed artist. Somebody else, a poet. Someone else, a musician, a singer. A young person does rap. And discovering those talents, discovering those gifts for people who have just arrived here, we integrate them immediately into our gatherings and into our projects. So people who have been told you're on the bottommost rung, and you're actually, as immigrants, and we're hearing this more and more in the discourse, public discourse, I can't read that far, sorry. You're part of the problem. Well, here they are being applauded on the stage of their new lives, and it's a quite powerful experience. And so art, and this is a point I really want to have the time to make, is that we do justice through the arts. 5 minutes, well, it's not too bad. We do justice through the arts as well. We've experienced it firsthand at Montreal City Mission, as I said, incorporating people's talents and gifts into our gatherings. German sociologist Hartmut Rosa, he's absolutely brilliant. If you don't know him, Google him, R-O-S-A. Listen to one of his TED Talks. He's one of the, I think, most brilliant thinkers of our time. And he talks about the concept of resonance. How do we create that resonance between one another? He uses the image of a tuning fork. You hit one side, it vibrates, and then it's the vibration that makes the other side move. It's not because you touch it. And he talks a lot about a lot of different things in terms of resonance, but one of the things he does mention is that music is very important in resonance, and how we experience, say, at a concert. We may not know the people that we're standing next to and with our lighters or whatever, but we're jumping up and down, and we feel that resonance, that we feel that electricity, we feel as, that common human bond, if I can say it that way. And music, of course, has been and has played an important role in all kinds of liberation movements. Think the spirituals. James Cone, another brilliant thinker, just passed away a couple of years ago. The Spirituals and the Blues, a little book, great read. And he talks about how the spirituals, the songs that the slaves sung, were not only to provide solace and comfort in what was an unimaginable, horrific context. As some scholars say, that was the main focus. But as Cone, C-O-N-E, James Cone points out, they also had coded messages, routes to freedom, the Underground Railroad. So union songs, protest songs, spirituals, Bad Bunny, huh? Show of hands, who saw the halftime show? Yay, wasn't it one? I've looked at it 5 times. Amazing, amazing. Bad Bunny standing up for not only Puerto Ricans, but migrants. So, my 4th point, I think that's my last point, wow, is that we can stand up for justice and we can stand up against hate through the arts and through music. It's something that brings us all together. I mentioned the concert where we're all excited and there's a throng of people, but it can also be in a symphony hall, sitting sedately, but maybe you hear that sacred chord that David played and that pleased the Lord, as Cohen once wrote. Christianity, 2 more minutes. So I've mentioned that, of course, Christianity has been the handmaiden of empire since it was made an imperial religion by Constantine in the 4th century. But ever since then, there have been, again, women and men who have stood up against that, who have protested oppression, have gone to their death to do so. We know people like Martin Luther King. We know people like Archbishop Oscar Romero, of course, gunned down while saying Mass in El Salvador. We know the women not as well, of course. I wonder why that is. And so we have people like Sister Dorothy Stang. She was killed in 2005, a Catholic nun, working in Brazil, working alongside farmers, trying to protect their land and against the international logging companies. She was assassinated for that work. Jean Donovan, a lay missionary in El Salvador, along with 3 sisters, Maura Clark, Ida Ford, Dorothy Cazell. They were abducted and they were assassinated for their work with the poor in El Salvador. So these are the brave individuals. These are the individuals who keep alive that Christian tradition before Christianity became a religion of empire. When Jesus walked the earth, and I'll end perhaps with the Gospel of John, 1st century. There is no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear. And the billboard at Bad Bunny's halftime show, do you remember what it said? What did it say?
The only way to fight hate is love.
Yeah, the only way to fight, or I think, yeah, the only way to, I think there's only one thing more powerful than hate, and that is love.
Yes.
Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, since you're mentioning a reference that was made first in Spanish. Merci beaucoup, really, for bringing the arts also and music and all of these different examples, naming people as a way to remember sort of the way in which they were courageous and committed to standing up to hate and standing up for justice. Thank you for doing that. And I'm particularly, I was also very thankful for the way in which you mentioned specifically, this Sudanese woman coming in sort of, and often we think of refugees as being in a situation that is so dire that we forget to ask them, yes, but before that, what are your gifts? And are some of those gifts, can they thrive here as well? So that was brilliant. And you also mentioned earlier on sort of the Rainbow Coalition. And given sort of that Reverend Jesse Jackson just passed away a few days ago, I want to give a tribute to him because he was one of the founders of the Rainbow Coalition in the United States that, of course, had rippling effects worldwide. So thank you again, Paula. I'd like to invite all 3 of the speakers to come up to a chair up here. And now we're really shifting to the real dialogical time between us. We also have, there we go. You're good?
Yeah.
So you take over?
Thank you.
That's great. And Godfrey will take over the facilitation, and it's all yours.
Patrice, you are here because there are some questions that you need to answer.
Thank you very much. I want us to put our hands together for our great panelists. Thank you very much. We have had, to me, when it comes to religion, what I only hear are words of wisdom. And my takeaway is that before we became affiliated to the religions, whatever each of us believes in or doesn't believe in, we were humans. And that's what I'm going back reflecting. Before I became a Christian, who was I? And when I look back, I was just a human. And what does that mean when we are talking about peace and justice and faith to our souls? So it's a Q&A moment, and I want to ask that we keep it short. Let it not be a story in a question, and also mention who you are directing your question to. And if you feel you don't want to use a mic or you don't want to stand up and speak, I have a notebook where I can give you a page for you to write your question, and it will be brought forward. Thank you very much. And if you have any question, you just raise up your hand and I will reach you wherever you are.
Oh, thank you for each of your presentations. They were very informative. I just had a question, as I myself, as a Christian, and given the current political climate, what is the best way to both fight against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia without, I guess, taking it away from my personal identity, in my faith, and being just against hate, against as a respect for humanity as a whole.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Sometimes it has been said that well, if you're in relation with other religions, then it might detract from your own religion. For me personally, it's been the opposite. These past 10 years, with my colleague Anwar, working on interfaith projects, interfaith dialogue, has strengthened my own faith. And I'll be quite honest, it's made me a little bit bolder, because as a Christian, because of the history of Christianity, being that, all religions, when they get into bed with politics, it's bad news, that we know. But Christianity, of course, as a protagonist in the Western colonial project, has wreaked incredible havoc in the world. So being from that tradition, sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes I've been embarrassed about that, and about that legacy, with the residential schools, for example. And so working with interfaith partners, finding the commonalities that we have together, seeing how Jews and Muslims are proud of their traditions has made me prouder of mine. I don't know if that's an answer, but...
The historical relationship of Jews and Christians has been very tense and very problematic, right? It has to do with the different way that Islam sets itself out in relation to Judaism and Christianity versus how Christianity sets itself up in relation to Judaism. It sets itself up by the 4th century as superseding and replacing Judaism. That leads to all of the different, rules and that both the church and local leaders passed that said basically, because Jews are the keepers of the scriptures that tell of the coming of Jesus, we have to protect them, in the sense, make sure that they continue to exist, but they should never thrive in any way. And that led over, and then of course there are multiple, there's the four main gospels, but unfortunately the Gospel of John places direct blame on the gathered Jews for the killing of Jesus, who becomes understood in Christianity to be a part of God. So Jews have killed a part of God.
right? So it's not shocking in that context that when the Black Death hit in the 14th century, many people said it must be the Jews. Well, they killed God, so like surely they could poison some wells and kill us. Now, the reason why I mention this is not to get into the dumps of like horrible moments in human history, but that I think Jews and Christians were smart after the Holocaust to realize that the first thing that has to happen is there has to be a dialogue in which, in part of that dialogue, is Christianity accepting the role that it has played in the negative Jewish experience. And that's what happened in the Second Vatican Council. Right, so I think that's part of the healing process. In terms of Jews and Islamophobia, one thing that most Jews in the diaspora that I'm aware of push back strongly on is those very Quebec laws that have been passed by the Legault government. I've had the pleasure of knowing Imad now, I think, since 2012, and I have tremendous respect for him. We disagree on things related to Israel-Palestine pretty significantly. We have a lot in common, but we have some pretty serious disagreements. But I'm pretty sure we agree on one thing. I don't want to see any legislation that comes out that targets Muslim practice in any way, and he doesn't want, me not be able to wear a kippah if I go in to teach. So I think that even in this fraught moment, Jews and Muslims, even though there are immense tensions between these two groups at the particular moment, can work together on a common agenda if they can see past, in some way, all of the other things that are, of course, very, very serious and very explosive.
To add to that, I mean, Eric is my teacher. I respect him and love him. I'm taking that course that you're taking. I took it with him a few years ago and learned a lot. But yeah, as it's normal to have disagreements. And when it comes to Muslims and Jews, I mean, historically, there is no historical animosity between Jews and Muslims. This started only in the 20th century, 100 years ago, with the creation of the State of Israel and the settlements in Palestine. That's what started the problem. But historically, one famous historian, Abba Eban, who was the prime minister, was the head of the chief of labor in Israel, and was the ambassador to Washington for 20 years. He has a book, History of My People, the Jews, and he says the golden age for Jewish culture and religion was under the Muslim rule in Spain. It's only comparable to today's United States, he says. So historically, there is no problem between Jews. It's not a religious even, I would argue. It's not even a religious conflict. It's about land. It's, in my opinion, it's about colonialism.
I disagree, but
I'm sure you do.
I don't want to get into a dialogue here. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, here.
Thank you so much for your presentations. Is it better now?
Yeah.
One question that I had is about accountability. So we have talked about dialogue. We have spoken about different manners of justice work across faith traditions. However, can there be justice without any form of accountability? So when you want to hold your own community accountable, how would you do that across faith systems?
Wow.
Thank you.
A quick answer would be, again, interfaith dialogue. How do we hold our own communities accountable? Patrice mentioned the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in South Africa between blacks and whites. We, of course, had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission here in Canada, headed up by the late Judge Murray Sinclair, looking at the horrors that were exacted in residential schools. So that's one way, those public reconciliation commissions, and also, as I was saying, interfaith dialogue, being vulnerable, being humble, and having, once again, a listening heart, listening to what the other side has to say.
I think that accountability is not where you begin the dialogue, although many would like to go there because it's so important. But I think one needs to go step by step. And as the trust, as the respect is shown in dialogue between people of different perspectives and often sometimes diametrically opposed perspectives, as the respect and the listening takes place, then eventually there is the trust that develops, which allows to go deeper. And that's when you can begin to sort of ask questions of accountability. And often the best way to do that is to actually start with yourself, my own self, and questions about my own tradition, my own action, my own beliefs. And as I take with humility stock of that and try my best to express to somebody else, how am I accountable to that history, to the privilege that may come for me, a white man, into sort of that reality today, vis-a-vis indigenous communities, for example. What do I do about it? And where can I develop sort of allyship with some of the different groups that have been marginalized or still are in many ways today? And so that accountability is best triggered in somebody else that you would like to hear about by actually practicing yourself first. And that's something which does not happen at the first day of a dialogue with new people. I can say that for sure. But it can happen if the dialogue space is well facilitated, carefully facilitated, and keys to good dialogue are developed together in a co-creative way so that everybody sort of becomes the owner of that sacred space of dialogue. Thank you for your question.
You're marketing the solidarity dialogues now.
I would just say that like accountability has a certain resonance to it. I know it's very popular in social justice circles, but to me, I would replace it with honesty. Right, and I think that that's the tricky thing. I think honesty is the tricky thing. Honesty as in, and I think Paula, you showed it like very clearly. You know, you were very upfront, honest about different things that have been done in the name of Christianity, you know, throughout history and whatever. I think honesty is the key thing. You have to be honest about things that are coming out from quote unquote your side. But you also want honesty from the quote-unquote other side. And maybe that ties into what Patrice is saying, is because once you get to a particular level of closeness via dialogue, people feel sufficiently safe that they can, that they can bring that honesty to the table. I have to say, as I finished talking, I was saying to myself, was I an idiot to show these tensions within the Jewish world in this audience? Was I being an idiot? Right? So the question of, when to be honest and when not to, like the importance of honesty as a first step, I think is key.
Yeah.
And knowing our students, they are looking at you and saying they are sitting absolutely in their comfort zone. These guys are absolutely having fun being in their comfort zone. Anti-oppressive practice is all about the discomfort, to question ourselves, our beliefs, our values, the way we grow up, thinking when we see the WhatsApp feed or the Facebook feed. What does that mean? Should I follow that? Should I think and have my own idea? As a social worker, tomorrow I will be in the community, how I'm gonna work with people from different faiths, different backgrounds, how I'm gonna make sure that I am not racist. All these questions are absolutely the questions that the students, and I'm gonna not push you, okay? I'm gonna invite you to your discomfort zone. So we all know that the book itself is providing different elements, and sometimes there are tensions within the book, like what you said, Eric. And yeah, sacred books, yeah, the Quran, the Torah, and I am familiar with the Quran and the Torah very well, but I'm not familiar with the Christianity the way I am familiar with Judaism and Islam. And we see these tensions, and I absolutely agree in the idea that it's how we interpret the people, how we practice these religions. And in the name of our religion, there are things are happening. There is Trump who is trying to take over the whole world and steal all the resources from all the people using your religion, Paula. There is the settlers, Eric, who are burning Palestinian houses in the West Bank using your name, Eric. There is Al-Qaeda who are killing innocent people in many places in the world using your religion, Imad. And again, the Trump and what they are doing. How do we use religion in a way that we can stand up against all these things that are happening, stripping us from our humanity, making us feel that we are not able to live together when we see the students and everyone? There is a way for us to live together, but we need your guidance. Your guidance in this way, how religion can, instead of being dividing force, how religion can be a place where people can get together and together fight for justice, together fight for peace, together to promote the well-being of humanity.
Thank you, Amal. Yes, a penetrating question for sure. I mean, I can answer. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, going back to the scripture, for example, Eric mentioned how anti-Semitism has its roots in the Gospel of John, for example. Now, as a Muslim, I always argue you cannot be a good Muslim and be anti-Semitic. It just doesn't work. If you read the Quran, the longest story in the Quran is that of the Israelite, with all its aspects, the covenant, the disobedience, the scattering in the earth, etc. And the hero figure across the pages of the Quran is Moses. He's the paradigmatic hero. He's the one who stands up. So you cannot read this as a good Muslim and be against Jews just because they are Jews, just out of the question. So I go back to saying it's always politics. Al-Qaeda and Daesh, again, the same thing. They don't represent, how can you be a Muslim, claim to represent Islam, and ignore all the central, your central piece of religion, which is the Quran. And again, I would argue, how can you be? I took social justice and Judaism with Eric. I learned beautiful things, but I don't see this in the practices of this state. I don't see it in Netanyahu. I don't see it in his cabinet minister and his Knesset members. All these people saying awful things. This is not Judaism. And this is going back to how do you stand up to hate. For me, as a Palestinian and as a Muslim and as a student of religion of this very university, how do I stand up to hate boils down for me to always keep a clear distinction between Judaism and Zionism, Christianity and the Crusades, and something along those lines. Otherwise, I can't conflate those two. It's terrible.
For me, it's reading the sacred texts with a critical eye, through political analysis, through an analysis of context, of culture. There are certainly, we use the term fundamentalist. in Christianity and in other religions as well. Actually, there's an excellent book by Karen Armstrong, brilliant historian of religion, called The Battle for God: Fundamentalism in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. It's a really, it's a must read. So from my point of view, and I know it's not a point of view that's shared with everyone, but that you have to look at these texts, you have to analyze them. So yes, the Gospel of John, anti-Semitic, there's a passage that says, and the Jews said, kill him. And then that passage, and the Jews said, kill him, has been used and used and used. Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King, Martin Luther, Protestant Reformation, that's at the root of my tradition, Protestant Reformed tradition, was an anti-Semite. He used that passage. But it was written in the first century by Jews. They weren't Christians at that point. There was infighting. The Roman state was oppressive. So there were different theories. Was it written that way in order to appease the Roman state that was a danger to that fledgling community? So there's no final answer to that. There are theories, but we have to look, I think, at Scripture as a description of the journey, the faith journey, the life journey of a people. The Bible, Hebrew Scriptures, New Testament, written over 1,000 years. There's texts of terror. There are horrible things in both the Hebrew Scripture and also in the New Testament. How do we understand those? So we have to analyze those, and then I think, secondly, we have to find the wonderful texts that Eric shared with us and that we can find as well in the New Testament, the texts of love, of mercy, and of compassion, and those are the texts that have to guide us in our lives.
Yeah, well, I'll say something. I have been in a permanent state of discomfort since October 7th, 2023, on this campus. Not only on this campus, but in the Jewish community as a whole. My students should kind of close their ears to this because, you know, it could be abusive podium in some sense, I don't know, to talk about these things. But the truth is, I don't find that there are many places where I can feel comfortable, right? Because I have a particular take on these questions. They are not the common take in the Jewish community. They do not coincide with the anti-Zionist Jewish community either. Independent Jewish Voices, which is had a prominent role in the early stages of the encampment here. They don't coincide with the current government of the State of Israel. They don't coincide with the majority of the people in the synagogue that I go to. They don't coincide with the views of my own son, of whom we have lots and lots of disagreements on some of these issues. So I carry the discomfort everywhere. What I would say about how to move forward, right? Yitz Greenberg, who I was going to tell you something about, I didn't get to, and I think that might have been a mistake. But I'll just read you something that he wrote, just four lines, right? He says, because he's a major advocate for Judaism and social justice. And he says, now that Israel is a flesh and blood state, it can only act and be judged in the context of the real world. If Israel proves to be 10% better ethically than the rest of the world, it will be a light unto the nations. If it proves to be 25% better, it will bring the Messiah. If it is 50% better, it'll be dead. Right? And what he's saying here, right, and I think there's a measure of truth to it, I don't think that you can separate when you can't separate the text from the political realities because you have to make decisions in the political realities. Now, personally, I disagree with almost 90% of what Netanyahu has done in the 17, 18 years that he's been in power. But I can see how a particular worldview might lead you to think that some of these things are important. I think it's all in our hands as the people who are members of the faith, right? So we have more than enough material, like Paula was saying, we have more than enough material in each of our traditions to find the material there that encourages us to take a different stance. And religion can be a massive inspiration because religion is older than any of the political ideologies that you know of. Religion has a long history. When we find people in a midrash from the 3rd century talking about some of the same challenges that we face in our day, that connects us to something that is big, that is large. So I think it is incumbent upon all of us who feel that the wrong parts of our respective traditions are being emphasized, are more vocal about, how our points of view are rooted in our tradition. And I don't think that Jews who are progressives as a group do a great job at that. Right? They often argue for wonderful positions, but they argue for them from the position of just a basic morality, right? Because they don't have the knowledge of the Jewish tradition to root their arguments in the tradition. It requires knowledge, it requires study, right? So I think those of us who feel in a particular way, we have to be educated and we have to make sure that the people who are using these texts in a way that we think is wrong do not manipulate the conversation.
Hear, hear. Very good. Hear, hear.
I am so happy with, thank you, Eric, for bringing up the example of Yitzhak Greenberg, who wouldn't have been Yitzhak Greenberg without Blue Greenberg. We have to remember that his wife, Blue, was one of the leading Orthodox feminist women in the Jewish community as well. So they complement each other. But Yitzhak and Blue founded also in New York City the first real intra-Jewish dialogue organization that still exists to this day. And those of us who have done either ecumenical Christian, intra-Christian dialogue, or intra-Muslim dialogue, and so on and so forth, often realize that it's much more difficult to do our intra-religious dialogue than the inter-religious one, because it's like family. It's family feud over interpretation of our own tradition. And so one of the things that has developed out of Cambridge University is called scriptural reasoning. If you look this up, scriptural reasoning, it's a whole methodology of how do you study text together, whether it's intra-religiously or inter-religiously or inter-worldview, including people of no religions per se. And so that methodology is also very important to ground ourselves because there are certain things that I will never see out of my own Christian text unless some Muslim or Christian or atheist raise questions about that. And so it's like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought about this, and so on and so forth. So it's really important to practice the reading of Scripture, among other things, in the intra and multi-religious and inter-worldview framework, so that we can be destabilized in our own readings of history and contemporary realities. And I want just to end one thing, is that I also, since October 7, 2023, I'm in a very uncomfortable situation, but not for the same reason as you, as a Roman Catholic Québécois de souche, because I'm a professor at Université de Montreal, which has done almost nothing to address those issues. And that is highly uncomfortable for me, teaching a course on geopolitics of religion, where I have to talk about those issues. But where is the commitment of the institutions to provide these spaces of encounter, of where you address those hard, polarized realities in our communities? Because an education institution, whether it's McGill, Concordia, University of Montreal, or whatever, if we are about educating each other, then we have to create those spaces, but those spaces needed to be safe. And that's a challenge. And learning how to go about doing that is really essential as part of being students. And sometimes as teachers as well, we don't necessarily know how to do this very well. As I often say, I got my doctorate in the history of religions. I didn't get it into peace studies or facilitation of dialogue. I had to learn those skills on the side, you know, and so part of the discomfort is a reality. I am sure many of you are at different degrees of discomfort in the room, and that's healthy, I would say. And I hope that there are opportunities also to share, especially since most of you are in either one of these two classes. You'll be able to go back to your classes and digest and share dialogically your comments and questions and reactions and feelings about what has come up this afternoon.
Yeah, thank you very much. We would have loved to continue. I know we have more questions to ask, but in the interest of time, the Q&A will end here. But I just want to mention that from our panelists, we have learned that we have enough text in whatever faith we believe in that we can use to stand up to hate and to stand up for justice. But also the environment on which we are standing must be providing that space that allows us to stand still in those spaces. So as we end the Q&A, we should go back asking ourselves, do we really find these spaces for us to stand up to hate? Do we find this text on our own, or we need other people to help us to see these texts in our faith that can help us to stand up to hate and also stand up for justice? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Godfrey and Sarah, for your conclusion. And we just want to make sure that people are aware of the iftar, the meal that we are going to provide right after 5 o'clock. And we need to, after Sarah, we need really to move quickly so the team can prepare for the iftar, bringing the chairs and the tables here. I just want to thank the panelists one by one. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Imad. And thank you, Patrice. Thank you for your friendship. I value amazingly our friendship and these spaces that we share. And we share all of these spaces together in many ways and in many discomfort zones. And I absolutely appreciate that, for teaching each other how to be in the discomfort zone and still care about each other. Thank you so much.